computers wherever they are, must have heard a lot about you and they've read a lot about you. But let us start with how difficult was it to get to this partnership and to get it as cohesive as it is right now?
Well, the partnership agreement was a difficult agreement to hammer out because although the parties had a common goal, a broad common goal, by the time we reached mid-February, the partners there was quite a considerable amount of, let us say, suspicion, as well as perhaps not a single view on the path to the agreement. So we had to go through a process by which we explored and explained proposals carefully. It is in outlining those proposals that we were able to persuade the two sides that there was a lot more common ground than might have been obvious at the beginning. I think what also assisted us was this, that the public, the Guyanese public in general, is completely fed up with the PPP. And therefore they have been putting pressure on the opposition parties to find a modality whereby they can work together. This is the mood of the public out there. It is true that segments of that public have different views, of course. Some are entirely PPP, some are entirely APNU, and don't want to hear anything about a coalition. But in fact, they recognize that although in 2011 a majority was against the government, the PPP ended up in office holding the presidency and imposing its will in a manner that most people find obnoxious, offensive, and denying Guyanese their dignity. So those pressures, especially after the negotiation started, almost every day people are saying, have you finished yet? Have you finished yet? The public expected an outcome. And in that way, forced the two parties to yield on things that they would otherwise have stood their ground on. So there are lots of issues. If you want to go through the agreement section by section, you're going to find that on the APNU side, people are unhappy about this or that. On the AFC side, they're unhappy about this or that, or suspicious about this or that. But when you look at it in total, and this is what I said to our cabinet, you have to look at the agreement in the round, not each element on its own. Of course, any element you might have thought it possible to get more of rather than to give as much as was given. But when you look at it in its entirety, as a package, the importance is that this is a package that by enabling the two parties to get together will force the PPP out of office by way of the ballot box. And that is what matters more than anything else. You cannot fix the country from sitting on the opposition benches. And you cannot fix the country whilst the PPP is in office. So the main purpose of the agreement was to bind the two parties together, to follow a common path, so that at the end of May 11th, a new government comes to office, a government committed to pursuing democratic practices, to inclusive governance, and to ensuring that there is a future for this country, which will keep our youths here and ensure that we can live a life that we all aspire to. So really, the public need work.
I'll ask Mr. Basil Williams the same question I'll ask you. In your deliberations, in coming together and creating this partnership, did you make room for example persons like members of the ruling party if they happen to lose?
Well, the two parties, and the APNU in particular as regards its 2011 launch, made it very clear that the future of Guyana lies in inclusive governance. That means including or involving representatives of all sections of the society. Of course, a big part of the discussion had to do with civil society, which includes trade unions, churches, private sector. But equally important, and perhaps more controversially, it made provision, and we had explicit discussion, of the need to include representatives, not so much of the PPP, but representatives of the community that the PPP represents. And therefore, that was very much part of the discussion. And one is not saying that you are going to include in a new government PPP ministers who are currently in the PPP administration, but that you include representatives of that community. That is the important thing.
Thank you very much, Carl, and all success.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for
very
taking
much.
the time.
Mr. Carl Bennett, former member of the National Assembly and former Minister of Finance, chatting with us here. I'm going to try to make my way over to Mr. Nagamoto and grab him as we continue our conversation here today. We're going to take a little break. I'll grab Mr. Nagamoto and we'll be right back.
Good luck. Thank you again.